later in this episode.
Like, we were the only people like us in the whole town. And so it was just the whole time we were there, and we were being faithful with what God had given us. And God was blessing, like, left and right. But the whole time it was this discontentment of like, yeah, God, thanks, but it's not coming how I want it.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't where I want to be. I don't want to thrive here.
Yep.
I don't want, so it was almost a rejection of what God was doing in that season.
Well, welcome to today's podcast. I am your host, Austin, and today I am joined by Nick and Kylie Jo Smith. Nick and Kylie Jo, thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. This is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. We're so excited. They are going to be talking to us on the topic of thriving through obscurity, which I'm very, very interested in. So go ahead, guys. Tell us a little bit about yourselves, and then tell us what that means to you.
Yeah, definitely. So Kylie Jo and I have been married since, when was our anniversary coming up? March 19th. Mm-hmm. Yep. 2012.
So far, so good.
I know.
All right.
Solid.
Yeah.
Solid. I was thinking at the time when the story started, but you didn't know when I was starting, so it didn't matter for me to reference you if you didn't know when I was beginning. So after we got married, God called us into the city because we are city folk, and we're originally from Kansas, but we lived in Wichita, Kansas, which is the largest city in Kansas. For those of you who don't know, that's a place.
Or that there are cities in Kansas.
Yes, with like roads and buildings and all sorts of really cool city stuff. But God called us out actually to the East Coast. We came out to Lancaster, and then after a season, God called us back to Kansas, but he didn't call us back to the city. He called us back to rural ministry. I was a person that never thought I would be called into formal ministry.
Yeah.
Our background is in theater. My background is in technical theater and audio and video production. And so God was like, no, you're going to be a pastor now.
Wow.
And so that was a huge jump. And
Yeah.
I remember telling our sending pastor at the time, who was kind of guiding us in that process, I said, no, Pastor Nick is like the bass player that helps in the youth group. You know what I mean? Like, he has a ponytail, soul pad. That's Pastor Nick. That's not me. Like, that's not what I do. And through a season, God was like, no, this is what I'm calling you to.
Yeah.
But in that season, when we were being called out of kind of this city living that we were doing, where we had a lot of stuff happening, we were involved in the theater community. We were working. We had a newborn son at the time. Isaiah was brand new, baby boy. We were kind of running from that calling for a little while. And it really took confirmation from, like, God had to show Kylie Jo that next season was like gonna happen, and it was okay.
Yeah.
And so
it was. So we were like living out here, had a great community, and at one point I remember, and I think looking back, it was a little bit arrogant, but at the time I was just so excited. I was like, we're gonna be here forever.
Yeah.
This is where we're gonna like live our life, and I was envisioning like all these things. And when the Lord called us away, I was like holding on to this idea of what our life was going to be. And I was like, no, please.
It's so hard, especially when you're like, I feel like this is from the Lord. I feel like these are good things.
Yeah.
That's so
100%.
hard.
Yeah. And you're using the gifts he's given you, and like people are like encouraging you, and you're like, oh, this is it. This is this. I have arrived.
Yeah.
And when we were back in Kansas, I remember sitting in the living room of this house that we had. And it was like, it was not our home. We weren't owning it. We were just kind of like, renting for the time.
trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
I'm rocking my son, and Nick was at work. He was working like a manual labor job at the time. And I just heard the Lord say, look around you, because you are coming into a season where you will have less. And I was like, what? How in the world? Like, you just took so much from us, and now you're telling me it's going to be less? And what does that mean? But there was also a peace that came over me. Like, okay, well, if this is from the Lord, I've already experienced his hand leading us out and removing us. So I know he can be trusted.
Yeah.
And then when Nick was wrestling with this calling, that I didn't even know he was going through all of this with the Lord. And then he comes to me and is like, the Lord's calling me to be a pastor. I was like, that's what that was.
Y'all,
Okay.
That was like the hardest conversation because when we went back and I was working it was a job that was great. I was making great money.
Yeah.
Especially for a young couple with just the one baby. Like, we were paying off debt. Like, things were great. Kylie was staying home full time. It was a beautiful setup. And God was like, yeah, you're going to have to leave this. And I was like, I don't want to tell my wife, like, hey, speaking of,
Yep.
I know this is cool and all,
Yeah.
but you're going to have to work part-time doing something because we ain't finna cut it
Yep.
on a part-time pastor salary. So I really felt God was calling me in through that wrestling to just say yes and trust him with the outcome. And
Yeah.
so I remember I was in worship at the church we were attending at the time. And I just felt God. I was just arguing with the Lord. I was like, Lord, no, like I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
That sounds crazy. I don't want to just go home, tell my wife like, oh, by the way, we're going to go into full-time ministry now. And that's the thing. I know we were performing and working manual labor and all that, but church now, that's what we're doing.
Yep.
But God said, if you follow me, I'll take care of them.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, like, how can I argue with that? You
Yeah.
know? And so when I brought it to my wife, who is just so amazing and listening to the Holy Spirit, she was like, I know. I was like, no, like, it's a part-time job and we're going to have to do full-time work. She's like, okay. I was
Yeah.
like, wait, what?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's been, just side note, that's just been how God has brought a lot of confirmation in our marriage. Is like, one of us will be wrestling with something and God has already answered it through the other.
So good.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so it's been really cool to see that. But we moved from this like bustling metropolis to a small, I don't even think it's really a town.
It's like 500 people.
I think that's technically a village. Like,
Yeah,
we moved,
yeah,
like
yeah.
we moved to a village. And it was a great community, but it was obscure.
Mm-hmm.
It was called, the town is still there. We have great relationship with the people there, but the town is called Burden, Kansas. That is the name of the town.
Burden.
Burden, like a burden on,
Oh, not
on
like a
someone.
bird tweet.
No,
Okay.
like,
okay.
no.
like
a
a
burden.
heavy burden.
And like a load on your back.
Is there a reason it was called that?
Yes, and I remember being told this at one point, but I've forgotten it since.
It was like a land rights thing. The guy
Yeah.
who paid the most money to start the town, his last name was Burden.
Okay.
And
Oh,
I was
okay.
like, surely there should have been a vote.
Yeah. So
Like,
the town's not a burden on people.
Yeah, like they're
Right,
like,
no, it's-
Okay.
oh, you paid the most money, so
Yeah.
your name's on the town. I was like, they could have thought a little deeper about that. Like,
or
yeah,
use
money's
his
a
first
factor,
name.
but
Use a different name.
yeah, like Johnstown or something, like something, like not Burden, but yeah. So we moved to Burden, Kansas,
Mm-hmm.
and we pastored a church of about 30 folks.
Yeah.
Faithful,
Yeah.
faithful people.
And that was honestly, that was it was a fruitful time for us in our marriage, and like we were raising our son, and then that was also the time where we were expecting our second child, and it was just like, oh wow, like okay, well maybe we can. And I remember thinking like maybe it's here, maybe we're gonna settle down here in a weird way. Like God brought us to this small town,
Yeah.
and maybe this is it. And that was one of the things that the Lord was continually showing me, was like every time I would think, this is home. This is it. This is it. He was like, nope, actually
yeah.
direct your attention here, back towards me. And so like, I remember we wanted to plant, I wanted to plant a garden.
I was not into the gardening thing. That was not for me.
His wisdom was, you're 6 months pregnant. Do you think this is the best time to start growing tomatoes and potatoes and watermelon and all of these things?
We also got a puppy. Remember that?
Yes, I do remember the puppy.
Also not my idea, but it was.
Yes.
I supported my wife through it.
Yes, but honestly, like this, even though I didn't grow a single thing well, and the one watermelon that I did grow, the puppy ripped it out of the ground.
Oh.
There's a sermon in there somewhere.
Yes, I know it. But even though there was all of this, like things weren't going the way I wanted to, and then I had this like looming question over my head of where are you going to give birth to your child, because the nearest hospital was like 40 minutes away. So I'm like, do I do a home birth? Am I going to do this? I don't even know. And like all of these unknowns, there was still so much growth that happened. And like, I got to like, it sounds so silly, but I was like washing my clothes and I would hang them out to dry on the clothesline. And there was such a peace. And I was listening to sermons and I was like growing with the Lord. I met these women who got up at 4 a.m. to work out. And I learned about how my body could be something more than just a product.
Yeah.
And I could like grow and like learn from these women and just like sitting at their feet. And so I was like, wow, I feel like I'm having my own little like revival in this community where I don't really know anybody. I'm not from here. I don't fit in that sense. And I'm the pastor's wife of this church. And so like there's a little bit of loneliness that comes with that too.
Yeah.
And yet the Lord was just like pouring his grace over me and giving me little bits of like, here's a way you can thrive. Here's a way you can thrive as a mama, as a wife, as a worshiper. And like, and that was a season I also like sat down at the piano one day and he was like, learn to play this. And I was like, I have never wanted to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But yet by his grace, I was like, okay, I'll try. And the mamas in the church were like, yes, keep trying, keep doing that. Yes, you're doing great. It's a little off, but yeah, keep working.
Wow.
And they were so kind and wonderful to me. And like, I felt like I thrived in that environment for the first time in a long time.
Yeah.
The hard part, though, was there was still a part of us that was longing for something different. So while we were there, we were still fighting that feeling of like, I want to be back around people. I remember quoting, the sage, the Little Mermaid, that great poetess, and being like, I just want to be where the people are. Like, this is, I don't know anybody. There's no one here that looks like us. This is no one in our age range. Like, we were the only people like us in the whole town. And so it was just the whole time we were there, and we were being faithful with what God had given us. And God was blessing like left and right, but the whole time it was this discontentment of like, yeah, God, thanks, but it's not coming how I want it.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't where I want to be. I don't want to thrive here.
Yep.
I don't want, so it was almost a rejection of what God was doing in that season.
Yeah.
And so we felt after a while that God had closed the door. It was time to move on from that pastorate. So we started knocking on doors of other pastorates. And I was like, okay, we're going back to the city. We're going to do inner city ministry. We're going to, be around like people again.
Yeah.
And God was like, no, well, kind of. So we moved from a town of 500 to a town of 1,500. So that was like an actual town. There was like a flashing light there.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Had
like,
a restaurant in the town.
Yeah, there was like 2 restaurants. We had 2 gas stations. It was dope. Like,
big deal.
Oh man, yeah, you're big city living there.
It was, yes.
but it was 3 hours away from a city. So it was way up in northwestern Kansas. And so we got up there and we were just like, Lord, why are we here? Like, why are we, you moved us from one super obscure place to another super obscure place. And so we just started again. Like, all right, let's just be faithful.
Yeah.
But the whole time, well, the beginning of that, it was still a lot of the same. Like, okay, this is temporary.
Yeah.
Let's just, dig in for a year or two, and then we'll see what else is out there. God had other plans.
Yeah. And that time we moved, we had just had our daughter, who was born in the parsonage in Burden.
Yes.
That ended up being
The
her,
only
her
child
birth plan.
born in that town for like 60 years.
Yeah.
Like, and the only child of color ever born in that town.
Yes.
Like, just to be honest, it's like she's a record breaker.
Yeah.
Wow.
So then we moved kind of in the same window of time that we had moved when Isaiah was born. We moved from PA when he was like less than 2 weeks old. We moved from Burden to northwestern Kansas when Becca was less than 2 weeks old. And so I'm entering into it like, again, postpartum. How is this going to be different? But also kind of having that thought of like, okay, well, maybe this is the place we're going to be. Maybe we'll land here. And I don't really like the idea of living here, but okay, God, like I could do it. And again, had plans for a garden and like redoing the backyard. And I was like, okay, this is what it's going to be.
Dug a fire pit.
Yeah.
We were invested.
Yes,
Kind of.
Yes.
Kind of. It was a little fire pit. That's how I know we were only kind of invested. It wasn't like a big
It
fire
wasn't a
pit.
big one. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're invested this much. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But the Lord, again, just brought so many things. Like there was this mulberry tree in the backyard that when we first moved there, it was just kind of whatever. It was meh. It was a little mulberry bush. And the Lord was just like, prune that. Like, take care of that. It's already there. You don't have to plant anything. And I was like, oh, okay, well. So I start like pruning at it and like reading about mulberry trees and like, how do you care for them? And they will take care of themselves, but you just kind of have to guide and direct them. And so we were there for 4 years, I think.
Yes. What we thought was going to be a year and a half
Yeah.
ended up being 4 years.
Yeah.
Almost 4.5 years.
Yeah. And in that time, like this little mulberry bush that was just kind of, I mean, it was pretty sad and sorry. It like grew over almost part of the back porch. And by the time we left, I remember sitting, like we knew we were called away. And I remember sitting on the back porch and just like looking at it and just like weeping because I was like, God, look what you did. Like, I feel like in a way, like I was that mulberry bush. Like I was like, oh, here I am. Just had another baby.
Just withering,
just kind of like, oh, God help me. And he did so much in pruning me personally. And I know even in our life, like we experienced so much loss in that season, family loss. We lost my brother-in-law was killed on Good Friday, one of the years we were there. And we lost my mother-in-law and we lost a grandpa and like just one right after the other. And there was just so much that felt like, oh my goodness, Lord, like, can you possibly take any more?
Yeah.
Can we take any more? Can we
Yeah.
really handle this? And how do we navigate this as a family? And then of course, all the things happening around, like in culture and society, that we were also feeling and experiencing on a different level. And it just, again, felt like his grace every time was like, but see, you've
So
grown
good.
in this way.
Yeah.
But see, I pruned that, but here's this growth, and like eat the fruit of that and enjoy that. And so that was just a really, in a weird way, there was a lot of sour and a lot of pain and loss, but it was also a sweet season of growth and
Yeah.
thriving. Again,
Yeah.
like being able to see the
Yeah.
things that he had given us that we didn't ask for, even if we didn't get the things we thought we wanted.
Yeah.
When I think what ended up happening was when we finally stopped fighting the Lord's blessing, like we finally stopped fighting God's plan for us, and we stopped trying to plan our exit. And we stopped trying to like guess what his next move was. Like,
yeah.
Lord, all right, well, I don't want to invest too much. And it was that, all of that, like, I don't want to go too far. I don't want to invest too much. And a friend of mine, a good friend of mine said, Pastor, every congregation, like, you're going to be there forever, even if you don't know if you're going to stay there a year. And so when we finally accepted, like, okay, we're here for now. And so, like, we need to invest fully in where we are. God started doing amazing things. And so we, like, during when the world shut down during the pandemic, I don't know if that happened out here, but where we were,
Yes,
there was a
very much
pandemic.
did. Yeah.
Okay. God, like, inspired us as a family to work on being more creative and working on music and pouring into our kids. We homeschool, so being more intentional with the time there and reconnecting with family, travel a little bit when we could.
Yeah.
We did a lot of driving, but we started to thrive and started to experience the blessing that was already there, but we were just kind of rejecting it. And we realized that God was doing amazing work in us in these obscure places.
Yeah.
And it was so cool to see like that echo in our personal walks, because there were areas of our like devotional life, personal development, personal growth that God was working on that we didn't even know needed work on.
Yeah.
So like these like obscure places in us,
Yeah.
God was causing a thriving to happen, and God was like working and doing amazing things. And then by the time we felt released from that pastorate, we looked back and we're like, man, we really like grew a lot in this time in this super obscure place way out. Oh, by the way, we moved from Burden, Kansas to Plainville, Kansas. And so God was upgrading us.
To 1,600 people.
Yeah, that's right. And so Plainville was, it was what we thought at first was going to be just like a drag, like ended up blessing our family in amazing ways. And we were able to grow, and like it was really cool to see God use us from like these city kids in rural Kansas. Like God was able to bless us and help our family grow and thrive in that area.
Yeah, that's awesome. What an incredible testimony of so many times we don't see that, like when we're in the middle of something, and it wasn't even necessarily always a bad something you were in, but like you just don't recognize the blessing that God's placing in front of you and the path that he has you on. And it's such a great reminder that we so many times think we know what's best for ourselves and for our families, and most of the time we don't actually. And like, I'm like, yeah, this is what it is. This is what God has for me. But no, like he's playing long game. Like we're thinking short term, and he's playing the whole game.
Yeah.
And he's with you no matter what. So what an incredible story of just God's faithfulness. Is there anything else within that you guys wanted to share?
There's so much.
Well, yeah, I think one of the things that the Lord showed us was like our not putting those spiritual blinders on.
Yeah.
And always looking, because like with social media, it's so easy. You're like, oh my gosh, there's so much happening in everyone else's world, and I'm just sitting over here in rural Kansas. And what we had to do was truly put those on and not compare and not wonder what we were missing out on, because sometimes the obscurity we felt was really just God's favor, but we were like so focused on other things we weren't seeing it accurately. And so I think that would just be, it's been a takeaway for me. And even in this season, like where we're back here in PA, and like it can be so easy to kind of settle in and be like, okay, I got this and I know, and like let those blinders come down. And it doesn't matter, even though we're not in obscurity in the
Yeah.
same way, we can still isolate ourselves in that. And so it's just
Yeah.
been something he's continuing to remind me of, like, don't forget about that mulberry tree.
Yeah.
Don't forget about all those things that we've learned and we've grown in with the Lord, and
Yeah.
just and just kind of being satisfied with
Yeah.
being wherever he has us has been it's been really beautiful.
That's good.
Yeah.
I think one of my takeaways from that season is like, don't despise the day of small beginnings. Like, we were just being faithful and being obedient, and God did amazing things in certain people's lives. He allowed us to be a part of their blessing, and he allowed us to see fruit and to see the beginnings of fruit, and to just like see lives changed.
Yeah.
And our hearts were shifted towards a group of people. And it was just beautiful, but it was one of those things where it was very easy to compare and to be like, well, this ministry isn't, I got 4 people showing up to this Bible study, but those 4 people were
Yeah.
meeting Jesus, and
Yep.
they were growing, and
That's
they
so
were
good.
experiencing the Lord. And so, just not despising those small things.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. Thank you guys for sharing this story. I do have one more question.
Yeah.
Is there a garden in Pennsylvania? Is there a thriving garden?
Actually, as the Lord would have it, the house that we purchased in the city has no yard.
No yard.
No yard.
There is I can't even like make it happen. He's like, listen, we're done.
Yeah, you have to get one of those like indoor like light gardens that
Now
people
that's
do.
an idea. That is an
Absolutely.
idea.
No, thank you for
Plant
that.
a little
Thank
mulberry
you.
bush inside. However that would work.
I appreciate that, Austin.
Yeah,
That
thanks.
sounds like a project
I do,
I'm going to
yeah, I
have
appreciate
later.
I do want to hear though. So what has God been doing in your lives? The years now, 2024. What are you guys up to? Like, what's the Lord been doing in your lives? Any
Yeah.
projects you're working on? Anything artistically?
Yeah. Well, I am performing at Sight and Sound, which is a huge blessing. I love all of my people there. And I also lead worship at the Milton Hershey School, which is truly such a blessing to my heart. All of the students there have a special place in my heart, and all of the team that I get to work with there it's amazing to just see God lifted up in those 2 different environments, but to see how the word is going forth and it does not return void. And
Yeah.
I can say I see that every single week, and it's amazing.
And now you have more coworkers than the entire town of Burden has people that live
It's
there.
true, yes. The student body of Milton Hershey
Like
School
4
is
times.
larger than Plainville. Yeah.
That's crazy. I didn't even think about that. I work for a nonprofit here in Lancaster City called Water Street Mission. I'm directing a community ministry for young adults called Compass. And Compass is helping young adults find vision, mission, and purpose. And it's for anyone in the city of Lancaster. And it's been a huge blessing just stepping out in faith and trying to build something from the ground up. And so, been going well. We do that. We raise our 2 children and our dog and our kind of cat. We have kind of a like neighborhood cat that's like ours for now situation. And then we also have a podcast that we do as well. So that's us.
Yeah.
What's the podcast called? Where can we listen to more of Nick and Kylie Jo?
Anywhere you listen to podcasts, it is the Nick Smith podcast, but it's spelled Nixmyth.
And one more time.
Nixmyth.
Nick's Myth.
Yeah.
Is this conspiracy theories or is it just a
You'll have to listen. No, it's not. It's totally not.
No. So the podcast started as us trying to help people understand some of the myths and misunderstandings surrounding life, faith, race, and culture.
Oh, that's so good.
It's kind of developed more into just helping people connect to living truth. And so we speak a lot about practical faith and how we live out our faith through our real life.
That's awesome. We're about to get a new follower right now.
Come on now. Come on now.
Hopefully a bunch more.
At least
so.
one more.
Yeah.
Just one more.
Do it for the
Awesome.
one.
Yeah.
That's right. Do it for the one. I love that.
Well, Nick and Kylie Jo, thank you guys for being here today.
Thank you.
And sharing your testimony of just what God did in that season of your life, and He's continuing to do. So we hope that was a blessing and encouraging to our listeners today. So thank you guys for listening. We appreciate that. Go ahead and give us 5 stars if you want to give us a rating.
Come on,
I've never
do
said
it.
that before, but give us 5 stars.
Do it right now. Do it
But
right
thank you
now.
guys for listening. We'll have another podcast next week. So we hope you have a great week and be blessed. Thank you for joining us on this episode of This Is My Story. Hearing these incredible accounts of God's work in our lives reminds us of the enduring power of faith. If you've been moved by these stories, don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform and on YouTube. And don't forget to share the inspiration with others who might need it. This Is My Story is recorded at Victory Church in the heart of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. You can learn more about This Is My Story and Victory Church in the show notes. Thank you for listening and be blessed.